This episode of Gators Breakdown is brought to you by BetterHelp. Prioritize your well-being. If you need help along the way, BetterHelp has got you covered. Visit betterhelp.com/gators and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/gators.
We got Gators Breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators Breakdown. Because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. Find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Joining me right here on Monday night, as he does every Monday night, co-host Will Miles at Will Miles SEC, readandreaction.com, and on YouTube. Will, how you doing, man?
Well, I mean, after this week, and really after this entire season, that BetterHelp ad is definitely an important one because I think we could all use a little bit of a place to vent and a place to talk about the different things that frustrate us about the Florida Gator program right now. Because I mean, it was a fun game to watch. It really was. I enjoyed watching it, but man, like. That was one Florida needed to get. One Florida should have had. Disappointed to come out of that one with the loss, but hey, excited that the players were there, ready to go, and that they put their hearts out there and really, quite honestly, dominated Tennessee in a way that I don't think anybody expected. So kudos to them, and just sorry to see that they weren't able to get the job done there at the end.
Absolutely. Game coulda, shoulda, woulda. A lot of ways there for the Gators. We'll get pretty much straight into the episode. I'm dealing with a sick 15-year-old dog right now, so my head's all kinds of places and trying to take care of him and stuff. So this episode, it might be a little clunky, but that's, we get it done here on Gators Breakdown. So just life happens, Will. So taking care of 15-year-old Oliver, trying to make him comfortable.
Oh man, does it ever? That's so tough, man. Everybody who's gone through, dogs who are sick and having to make those decisions, always tough. So,
yeah,
prayers up to Oliver, especially since my little kid, his name's Oliver too. So, so it's a little different for me, but buddy, we're all rooting for Oliver, rooting for you, and certainly hope for the best. And if nothing else, we're behind you.
Yeah. We'll he's been through a lot, so he'll come through again. But all right, everybody, we'll get to it. Lots to talk about this episode, of course. We'll look back at the Tennessee game a bit because of what Billy Napier had to say on this Monday, after he reviewed the film and stuff, and also, of course, the big news that we kind of thought was coming here on this Monday. Graham Mertz will be out for the rest of the season, of course. So you're kind of the storylines we'll be diving into this episode of Gators Breakdown with Kentucky on the horizon this weekend. So everybody hit that like button right here on YouTube. It really, really helps us out. Subscribe right here on YouTube as well, or your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to keep the conversation going right there, go to Gators Breakdown Plus. Link is in the description. That Discord server, keeping that conversation going, very lively, of course, discussion the last couple of days and where these Gators are. If you want to talk to some fellow Gator members throughout Gator Nation, that Discord on Gators Breakdown Plus, great place to do it. Get those ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown as well. So, let's dive into a little bit more. I know you put your article out. I did my episode there late Saturday night. Of course, a game Florida probably should have won in many ways versus Tennessee. Napier had to say on that quote, obviously after reviewing the video, I kind of think it verified what we saw Saturday night. I think the team fought extremely hard. It was an incredible effort. You got to give the players and staff obviously some credit relative to a great week of prep and being in the right mindset to compete on the road in this league. Obviously, the tale of the tape is we weren't able to capitalize on a ton of opportunities we had in the first half. Couldn't quite overcome that when it came down to it. That there will be opportunity here for our team to learn and to respond, and I know they'll do that. So everyone got my thoughts, Will, on the game last episode, but anything to add, Will, a couple of days after you've been able to stew on this one?
Yeah, I think that they did a pretty poor job of helping DJ Lagway there in the second half. I went back and looked at his 8 possessions in that second half. They had 12 negative yardage plays. So they had 3 penalties, 2 sacks, 2 screens that were for losses, 5 runs, where the guy was getting hit in the backfield. Some of that is predictability of the runs, but some of that is just the offensive line, the running back not doing their job. And all of a sudden you're sitting in 2nd and 12, 3rd and 11. And, if you go back and look, I think they had 1 third down that was short that they didn't convert. And other than that, they were putting Lagway in positions where he had to convert 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12. A couple of times where that was because they let Lagway throw the ball early. But, if you think about the overtime drive as sort of a microcosm of all of that, where you get the false start and then you get the screen pass that goes for a loss. And all of a sudden you're sitting there at 2nd and 20, 3rd and 20, and you're not able to really do anything other than prepare for a field goal. I mean, the big thing is that Florida played well enough to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't win it not because of one error, but because there were systemic errors throughout. And it reminded me of the Utah game last year, where the comment I made after that game was it's a complete system failure. Talked about, Billy talked about everything being great during fall camp and how people were lining up correctly and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, I don't believe you, because it didn't occur on the field. And these are pretty simple things. Like, they took the timeout with 1 minute, 10 seconds left on the last drive to avoid a 10-second runoff after a penalty. The penalty, okay. Like, I can understand that.
Oh, well, okay. We'll get into that.
But blowing the timeout, if you're gonna gives you the opportunity to go for 2 if you score the same way they did, because now you have 3 timeouts, can stop the clock and can get the ball back. And it changes the percentages of that play if you have all 3 timeouts. And so blowing those sorts of timeouts, blowing the timeout at the end of the first half, where to me it looked like it was an illegal formation, that their wide receivers were not lined up properly, which is why Mertz was yelling at Air Badger down there in the lower side of the screen, because I think they had too many guys in the backfield and were going to get called for an illegal procedure, and it was going to be a runoff at that point anyway. Again, they used the timeout. It was going to be a 5-yard penalty. They used the timeout, and now they don't have a timeout afterwards. But Mertz takes a sack when, we're talking about a 6th-year senior who should know better. The intentional grounding, you get a 10-second runoff, but the clock stops, or at least the clock stops enough to allow you to get your field goal team out on the field. So take the grounding. You're going to get sacked anyway. Just chuck that thing like completely sideways, a yard forward, obviously, not backwards because it's a fumble, but chuck that thing into the stands. It's intentional grounding. The 10-second runoff comes and you've got time to field goal. So all the little things, all the attention to detail, all the stuff that Billy Napier promised when he came is stuff that still is systemically wrong. And, I'm glad that the team played hard. I'm never going to root against Florida. I want them to do well. I want them to win. And I'd love to see them win the rest of the games the rest of the year. I'd love to see DJ Lagway excel. But I still think that none of that replaces the fact that there are system and attention to detail problems that should be fixed by now with competent coaching. And those things are not fixed, which means the opposite is true.
Yeah, I mean, it's just finding ways to lose games. That's what happened Saturday night. Well, let's get into some of those coaching situations. Napier was also asked about those today as well. And the question was, coaches always second-guess themselves after the fact. Do you have any second guesses about not going for 2 there, or maybe even the 4th down run at the on the end around on that play, on the 4th down end around to Trey Wilson? So Billy Napier responds, look, we rolled the dice there. He's talking about the 2-point conversion, and kind of had our play and went with it. Then they called timeout, and we felt like maybe given the next one, given the dynamic of our team, I think a lot of it is the game and how the game went. Where do you feel like your team is at? How you're playing defense? Those type of things I think contribute. If it was 47-47, maybe it's a different approach. But just think defensively, our kids battled their tail off and played a heck of a game. You felt like you were in pretty good shape there. Obviously didn't go the way we wanted it to go. You're always going to have that perspective. The end around play is just an incredible play by one of their secondary players. It was well blocked. It was a great decision. So in terms of the execution of the play, the guy just made a phenomenal play. If you had told me that was going to happen, so I think it was a really good football play by their corner, in the quote. So look, going to those 2 situations, look, for 2-point conversion, yes, I still would have went for 2. The offense had been struggling up to that point. Will, kind of going to your point, until Lagway found DK in that 3rd long touchdown. It just seemed odd to me, Will, that they lined up in the unique formation And at that point, you knew Tennessee was going to call a timeout if they had seen anything they didn't like. Then it sounds like, then it just sounds like Florida would have, if they didn't, Florida would have run the play. So, I guess thinking about it more, shouldn't you have a decoy formation or a play drawn up in that scenario? Like, lots of teams, if you come out in anything weird, what's the first thing you think they're going to do? More likely they're going to call a timeout. So shouldn't there be a decoy? Shouldn't there be another play drawn up? You got to have more than one play in that situation. Or if that's the only play you felt comfortable running, to me, it's a lack of preparation. If you got to be prepared for that situation, they're probably going to call a timeout. If they got the timeouts in their arsenal, they're probably going to call it. Like, to me, that should not have swayed your decision. If your first inclination was to go for two, you got to be more prepared to go for two.
Yeah, so I'll deal with both of those situations because he's right on the second one about the secondary player making a great play. So, in fact, in my post-game article, I showed a 3rd and 1 on the drive before where they got absolutely stoned. And they had the same numbers disadvantage in the box, and that's why they ran the play outside to Wilson. And it took an unbelievable play from the defensive back for Tennessee to stop that play. I think I run that end around time after time. I agree with Napier on that one.
I did. I even said before the play, that was probably what I would have run. Well, I know it didn't run. I know that was only inches, and you probably get the first down. If the play hits, it's probably a touchdown. But they do make a hell of a play.
Well, again, I go back to sometimes a guy just makes the play. And you can make an argument that he should have challenged the spot and, waste a timeout, obviously. But is it worth it? Because then you can make sure you set up your 4th down play. But so they, on a 3rd and 1, they got stoned on the drive before. And you could see they motioned, it wasn't Wilson, but they motioned, I think, DK over behind Mertz. And the defensive back moved. And they immediately said, oh, that's how they're going to defend that. If they defend that defensive back is going to have to get through all sorts of traffic to bring down that guy. So worst case scenario, we're gaining 2 yards. And it just so happened that the guy made an unbelievable play on the next play for Wilson. So if anybody wants to see a full description, you can go to my post-game article and see it. But I agree with Napier on that one. The answer on the 2-point conversion is awful. And the reason it's awful is not because I don't necessarily if that's what he was actually thinking, he's an idiot. And what I thought he was trying to do was I thought he was trying to get them to call a timeout because giving them one less timeout made it less likely that when he kicked off to him with a tie score that they'd be able to drive all the way down the field. Now, that's giving him an awful lot of credit to be thinking way ahead that way. But once they called that timeout, I went, okay, the math has just changed a little bit here. And in fact, if you look at win percentages, and I wish this is the kind of answer he'd given, he could have said 47% this year is the percentage of 2-point conversions that are made. ESPN's win probability calculator had Florida at 52% after they kicked the extra point. So the analytics, it's not an easy call. And if you go for 2, you're going to get killed if you miss it. If you go for 2 and you hit it, they still have an opportunity to really chuck the ball downfield and go after it. And then the other part of it is that if you don't go for 2 and you kick the extra point and you lose, you're obviously going to get killed for it too. In many ways, the analytical decision, I think, was right, given the limitations of Florida's offense, given that Lagway had struggled, given that the offensive line could not block Florida up front in that 4th quarter. Now, you do sort of need to gauge that with Florida's defense gassed. But I think you can make some arguments that the defense had actually played really, really well in that 4th quarter and that they were not gassed at that point. And so I understand what he did. I think analytically it probably makes sense by a percentage point or 2. But we're really talking about a 51-49 decision when we're talking about going for 2.
Yeah.
The problem I have with it isn't the decision. The problem is the thought process behind the decision is awful. If that's really what happened, we had this one play and it was this weird trick play and it's the only one that DJ Lagway has repped because he was only getting 1 out of every 3 snaps and like those excuses are bad because it's exactly what you said. Go out there, get in some configuration, run it to the opposite side, do whatever you're going to do. And even if you gave away the play, honestly, if the play is good enough, You should be able to score it even if Tennessee calls a timeout. So,
and honestly, is that formation really going to give it away anyway?
Again, I don't think – I'm hoping that's not an honest answer from Napier. I'm hoping that he knew that when he shifted, he'd get the timeout. He wanted the timeout called to make it less likely that Tennessee would be able to drive down the field with the 35 or 40 seconds left, whatever it was. And he was always going to kick the extra point. And he was going to call a timeout if they shifted and then Tennessee didn't. Like if Tennessee basically dared him, that he was going to go up, got to call timeout. And then he'd go out and kick it. Or maybe even he'd let the clock run out, take a delay a game, and then kick the extra point from there. And then he could use the excuse, well, we were going to go for it, and then we couldn't get, we didn't like the way we saw what the defense was doing, so we took that delay game, and then we couldn't go for it. I think at the end of the day, he wanted to kick the extra point. I actually think kicking the extra point from an analytics perspective is probably the right answer. But I think you're talking 51-49, and you're going to get criticized no matter what. So, again, I sort of go back and say the problem here is not whether they went for 2 or not. The problem is they should have been up by 20 when Lagway threw that touchdown pass. And fundamentally, this is the thing. It's so funny. So, like, I wrote an article early this year during the offseason where essentially I looked at Hall of Fame coaches and all the coaches who've won SEC championships. And the ones who are sort of middling who won SEC championships are guys who play an awful lot of close games. And then if you look at the Sabans and the Myers and the Smarts and even guys like Phil Fulmer, certainly Spurrier, you look at those guys just don't play close games. Mm-hmm. That's why they win. They don't play close games. And when they do get into close games, you know what? They only win about 50% of them. Like it might be 55 or 60 for some of the truly elite coaches, but they don't like in the coin flip games. Like think about the games that Nick Saban lost. They were always games where like Auburn was hitting some ridiculous play on the last, some fourth down where they hit it back in the back of the end zone, or the kick six, or even the games where they beat Georgia, where it's like Tua throwing to the guy down the sidelines after they've pulled Hurts out of the game. Like the losses that the Georgias of the world and the Alabamas of the world and the Ohio States of the world suffer are close games, and they're not any better than anybody else when they're in a close game. They just aren't in dogfights as much as everybody else. And so to me, yeah, we can talk about the 2 points. We can talk about the clock management. We can talk about all that stuff. Fundamentally, the problem is that Billy Napier's in way too many close games when he's not getting blown out. And those close games are going to go his way 50% of the time. And that means you're going to lose a bunch of these games like they lost Tennessee.
Yeah, well, we know the margin for error is thin with this team. We know they're going to be in a whole bunch of close games. They hurt themselves in these close games. You have to be pretty much perfect outside of just to play on the field. You can't keep killing yourselves here if you want to turn this thing around. We know how critical this year is, and we still see these mistakes that are adding up. He was also asked about the timeout usage, Will, on the misalignments and not having them at the end of the first half. He was asked, do you think play calling takes away ability to game manage stuff like that, having that on your plate? I know play calling thing has been going. Does it detract in keeping things aligned and running smoothly? And Napier responded in terms of what situation. And the question continued, just the game management things when you have injuries or misalignments, stuff like that. Any of the sloppiness that people talk about. Napier responded, quote, even if I weren't calling the plays, if a guy is misaligned and we're about to get a penalty, we're going to call a timeout. Yeah, if anything, you're probably a little more tuned in, to be quite honest. So, no, I don't think this takes away from that part of the job, in the quote. So, look, we've talked a lot, Will. Gator Nation has talked a lot about the offense needing to be better in certain areas, and we've detailed that coming into the season and certainly during the season as well. And look, overall, still the offense has done enough to win more games here at Florida if paired with a better defense. But another reason fans have clamored for an offensive coordinator is so Napier can manage a game better. But he doesn't think that would help, and he has said as much before when he says he has a pulse of his team when he's calling the plays. And look, he is right that you have to call the timeouts in those situations. But that isn't the issue here. It's having to call those timeouts. That's the issue. When the margin for error is so thin, like we're talking about, when you need so many things to go right to win games, it's not just on that's the issue. You need so many things to go right. And it's not just on game days where that could be causing the issues, but is all the attention you have to dedicate to being the play caller causing issues in, preparation, development, film room, meetings, to where these miscues that we are talking about keep happening in critical situations and costing Florida. So this isn't in a vacuum. This is just something that we have seen way too much of. And for the situation Napier and this team finds themselves in, it's even more inexcusable. So yeah, for him to spin it around to be like, well, yeah, we got to call a timeout. Well, yeah, you do, but only because you put yourself in the situation to begin with.
Well, so where to start here? So in the preseason magazine that Nick and I put out, I had an article in there that basically said I admired Billy Napier because he's going to go down with his guns blazing. Like, he believes that him being an offensive coordinator gives his team an advantage and that it does not take away from his game management. If that's true, he's a terrible game manager. and
average at best play caller.
There you go. And so you start looking at it and say, okay, good. I mean, again, the reason I admired him was not because I thought it was a good thing or a bad thing. The reason I admired him was this is what he believes in, and he's either going to go down with the ship or he's going to ride off into the sunset. It's going to be one of those two things. And that ship's taken a few cannonballs over the last few weeks, and it's I'm not sure it's going to make it to port. I think it might be going down, and he's going down with that ship. And so he's decided to do that, and that's that's just sort of the way it works, right? But so the funny part is we talk about like the timeouts and that sort of stuff. But let me go through the last drive. The final touchdown drive started at the Tennessee 31 with 2 minutes and 31 seconds left. 1st and 10, they have a run for 10 yards, and they didn't have a snap before the 2-minute warning. Then at 2 minutes on 1st and 10, they have a run for -2 yards. They get an Austin Barber false start at 1:18 on the clock. That's when they take the timeout to avoid the 10-second runoff. So we've gone from 2:31 to 1:18. They've run the ball twice for 11 yards. We're sitting at 2nd and 12 and 2nd and 17 after the false start. And you've wasted 1 minute and 13 seconds in order to get there. So then 1 minute and 18, they throw a screen to Jackson for a loss of 1. The clock runs to 36 seconds before the next snap. So again, we've now wasted 1 minute and 55 seconds for 3 plays, blew a timeout, and with 36 seconds left, we're sitting at 3rd and 18 at the 27-yard line. Lagway hits DK for a touchdown. But I was about to absolutely just grill Billy on the time management there at the end of the 4th quarter. If Lagway doesn't hit DK on that play and it's 4th and 18, you got 18 seconds left or something after that play. Or what if they tackled DK short? Like, what if DK gets tackled at the 4-yard line? Now you're like running up to the line of scrimmage to clock the ball at the 2-yard line. You took the ball over at their 31-yard line with 2 minutes and 31 seconds left. And you're talking about having to clock the ball and use timeouts, and you get the 2-minute warning. I just look at it and go, it's complete malpractice to waste that amount of time. And a bunch of people are like, well, he was trying not to leave Tennessee time. You did not have enough offensive performance in that second half to be gifting anybody anything. Like, you're not trying to manage the clock to make sure you give Tennessee 10 seconds. Tennessee hadn't been able to move the ball either.
Well, as you said, you pointed out to me when I was joking about that, they called the timeout to save the 10-second runoff.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sitting there
they're not trying to save time.
Well, but again, then they throw the screen and they let it run down to 36 seconds. Like, they averaged 38 seconds per play on the first 3 plays of that drive. And they're at the 27-yard line on a 3rd and 18 when they get a miracle where DK comes open. Lagway made a great play. DK ran a great route. But still, I mean, if Lagway doesn't step up in that pocket and doesn't keep his eyes downfield, he's getting tackled. What if he'd have decided to run there? Like a true freshman quarterback? Mm. I mean, we saw Nico last week against, who was it? Arkansas. Like, runs out of bounds when he should have at least just chucked the ball into the end zone towards somebody. So to me, that drive more than anything, like, we can talk about the fumble at the 1-yard line. We can talk about the revert or the end around on 4th and 2 inches. We can talk about 3rd and 1 getting stuffed. We can talk about, the too many men on the freaking field penalty when you're getting when you're kicking the field goal. Like, we can talk about all those sorts of things. They all cost Florida points. But to me, the microcosm of everything was that last drive where you need to preserve, like, you got 2 minutes and 31 seconds to go 31 yards. If you're at the 4-yard line and you decide you want to start running clock, okay, I can understand. They were at the 27 on 3rd and 17. Like, they needed to make a decision, because if it had been 4th and 17 and then they turned it over back to Tennessee, they wouldn't have had enough timeouts, and there wouldn't have been enough time to get the ball back. And the way things were going, that's what I thought was going to happen. And then all of a sudden we saw the benefit of DJ after seeing an entire second half where the kid looked like a true freshman. All of a sudden it was like, oh, like, look, that's there. Like, that kid has that. And, so to me, that's the place where I just focus and I go, again, Billy's going to go down with the ship as a play caller. I've become not numb, but I've accepted that that's the way it's going to go. And people are going to have to make a decision either before or after, but the management of the drive is the offensive coordinator's job. Like, even if we had Bobby Petrino that we brought in to be the offensive coordinator and it was taking 38 seconds per play, when you take over at the 31-yard line with 2:30 left, like, we'd be grilling the offensive coordinator going, what is that? Get the freaking play in, like, actually show some urgency. Like, so, and this is not a one-time thing, right? Like, this is the lack of urgency when Florida has needed points and when Florida has been behind has been a consistent theme in every game, except for the last time Billy Napier was at Neyland Stadium, where they showed that urgency and were able to come back and almost get that one too. So, I mean, it is what it is, man. Like, we're going to look at the end of the year, or maybe after the Kentucky game next week, and we're going to point to him being the offensive coordinator, the play caller, all the little mistakes that happen from time to time or all the time. We're going to look at that, and we're going to say that's one of the things that sunk him. But he decided that that's what he wanted. He's taking on the oncoming fire right now, and the boat does not look like it's going to make it to port. That's for sure.
Well, before we get to Graham Mertz and him being out for the 2024 season and some quarterback talk, of course, we will have to spend a lot of time on it because, we have a lot to talk about still. But the defense, second game in a row since the bye week, has certainly come to play. Does opponent play into it? Sure. In both of our previews last week, especially here on the podcast, kind of warned that, hey, maybe Tennessee wasn't as good as I thought they were a couple of weeks ago. And then you start diving in to their offense, and you started seeing some issues with Nico that continued against this Florida defense. Florida's defense did a lot to cause that, especially shutting down the run for the most part against Tennessee. Sampson got his touchdowns, but didn't get the yards he's used to getting this season. So Florida not letting another quarterback take advantage of them. Not a lot of explosive plays given up the last couple of weeks. And even though the opposing offenses were bad against a bad defense in games past, you expect a Florida defense to give up explosive plays. That has not happened, the last couple of weeks. So, yes, they are better. They have taken steps. Does opponent come into it? Sure. But you see a lot more aggression. You see personnel package. You see turnovers in this last game. I mean, 2 in the first half. One on the first drive, stopping some Tennessee momentum. One right before halftime that really, we already know what happened after that. But still, the defense puts them in position to get an upset on the road, and then in the second half, still made enough plays to win this game for Florida. So certainly has come a long way. They've figured some things out. I know Austin Armstrong's on the sideline now, so I don't think he's calling the plays, but from what I've been told, has a lot more input on the defense since the bye week there. Maybe you see some more of the aggression that he brings to the table that we saw as a DC last year, but certainly have played better up front. Guys making plays where they had to play strong up the middle against Tennessee. We did see that. Will, just 2 weeks in a row that I'd certainly hope continues, because I saw you, I think you either tweeted it or you texted to me about how fun it was to finally watch a defense like this. And we've gotten it 2 weeks in a row. They are better. Some more tougher tests are coming up, of course, but I think we can say, even against UCF, even against Tennessee, they are better right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Florida gave up 4.5 yards per play. I think there were some early deep shots that if Nico had hit, maybe make us feel different. There were some guys who were open behind the defense, but that's all part of it, right? I mean, when a guy has a big arm but is inaccurate deep, hey, let him take some of those shots, and maybe he hits one or two of them, but we're willing to do that because it allows us to creep up on certain things. Denson made an awesome play on the interception. Obviously, he's dropping back in that zone. Nico throws the ball right to him, but still, you got to make the catch. There have been plenty of times where Florida's defensive backs have not been in the right spot.
Yeah.
I thought Sharif Denson played really well. I thought Jaden Robinson played really well at the linebacker position, 7 tackles, 1.5 sacks. And I thought Pup Howard was everywhere. Just recovers the fumble on the opening play or on the opening drive. Only had 5 tackles and a half a tackle for loss, but still, I thought Howard was all over the place. And look, Florida had 8 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. And obviously, it was
oddly enough, the sacks were all clustered together,
all in a row. But Nico looked pretty comfortable in the first couple of drives, especially that first drive until he had the fumble. And then it was either the next drive or the drive after that they got the 3 straight sacks. And from then on, he looked completely flustered. And that's something that happens with freshman quarterbacks. And you and I were talking I think after the episode last week, I mentioned, Nico's high school stats weren't all that great. I actually did find it. I put it in our preseason magazine in a place where I talked about Nico's stats. Do we trust the redshirt freshman? His high school stats aren't all that great. From an accuracy perspective, his stats were not that great. And it's interesting, like a QB rating of 108. So if we're gonna criticize, Lagway for how he played, he had a QB rating of 109. Nico had a QB rating of 108. If you hold a quarterback to something well below average, especially given what we've had from this defense so far over the years, or for the last 4 or 5 years, I think yes, the defense is getting better. The defense is much improved, and now they're just going to have to make sure that DJ Lagway can make the offense take that step as well.
Yeah, Jonathan G says even Castell's trying to tackle, so definitely a better game for him too. But certainly a welcome sight. We got in 2 games in a row now where we can talk about this defense in a positive light, something we hope continues. Kentucky, a roller coaster on offense this year, certainly going to be another test for this team. We know how physical they like to play. We know how Florida has struggled with that physicality against the Wildcats the last few years. So certainly a test that Florida's going to be ready to play up front once again against Kentucky. So, yep. I'm eager to see it. See if they can put another game together. So, all right, we'll get to some quarterback talk there. But of course, before we do, Gators Breakdown is brought to you by BetterHelp. Life gets hectic, I understand. And with so much on your plate, it's easy to neglect self-care. That's where therapy with BetterHelp comes in. Therapy isn't just about solving problems. It's about empowering you to become your best self and reconnecting with your inner strength. It's a journey of self-discovery and growth. Now, look, I know life has been pretty hard out there lately for us here in the state of Florida, throughout the South. So many of you have been affected by a lot lately. Life's been hard down our way. Well, BetterHelp brings therapy to you. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Gators and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gators to get 10% off your first month. All right, well, let's keep it going. Of course, after we see him coming out of the locker room on Saturday night on crutches, not really much of a surprise that we get the announcement on Monday that Graham Mertz will miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. And, of course, now turning the page to DJ Lagway. Here is what Billy Napier had to say on the situation.
I want to go ahead and declare, Graham Mertz has torn his ACL, and he will be done for the season. He'll have surgery next week. And I think it's only right for me to say how much I appreciate and am thankful for Graham in terms of all that he has brought to the table, to our team, not only his production on the field, but also just his impact on the team as a whole, his leadership, the work ethic, the example, the self-discipline. And I would say that it's been awesome to be a part of his growth and development, and to see him get to the place where he's been here lately. So Graham's meant a lot to me, but I would also say he's meant a lot to this program and certainly the University of Florida. And he has a sincere care for this place and all that it has done for him.
You know, the situation with Graham, just what kind of blow is that to the offense? And then also getting DJ prepared kind of for the pressure of every down in the SEC. You know, he has played a non-conference game.
Well, I would say, you know, I think there's some excitement in terms of DJ and what he's been able to accomplish thus far. And I think he'll be much more prepared, having started a game, but also having played in each game this season. So we'll be a little bit further along because of that investment. And I do think that he will benefit from taking all the first team reps the entire week. And then Aiden Warner will be the backup, and we'll take the reps with the twos. So I think that we'll be a little bit further ahead maybe than we would have been if we were just playing one player. So, you know, it's going to be – DJ has this innate ability to kind of rise to the occasion and step up in big moments, and I'm confident that he'll do that in this situation. I also think it's a great opportunity for the team as a whole to kind of raise their level all throughout the team. Every position group unit, you know, we need to do that.
What's DJ how's he changed the offense? You see like spurts of it when he's down.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys have been watching him play. Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously explosive arm talent. I think the ability to escape, extend, the running element. Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately you've had a chance to observe him play. There's nothing that he can't do. I think he's capable of doing. He's proven over time that he can operate all the situational stuff, all the protection stuff, all the combos. He can handle it.
All right, Graham Mertz did post on social media today, Gator Nation, thank you for 2 incredible years in Gainesville. Unfortunately, I suffered a torn ACL against Tennessee and will miss the remainder of the season. During my recovery, I will remain part of the program and do whatever I can in meeting rooms and from the sideline to help my teammates win. I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of support during this time. So, Will, of course, Graham Mertz started 16 games for the Gators, was injured in the second half of the Missouri game last year to miss the FSU game as well to end the season. This year, injured against Miami with a concussion, so missed the Sanford game. And has since split time with DJ Lagway until getting injured in the second half against Tennessee this past week while throwing for a touchdown. So had a record of 7-9 as a starting quarterback for the Gators. Will certainly would have been better had Florida had a defense to complement him in a few games. Completed 74% of his throws, 3,694 yards, 31 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in the orange and blue. Settled the position down. Certainly there at the quarterback spot for the Gators. You knew what you were getting most of the time with Graham Mertz, and, you know, damn if you didn't give it his all. Last season, you know, hit over and over again, just kept getting back up. Well respected for his role, Will, how he carries himself, his leadership, and all that I really think, you know, helps DJ Lagway at the same time. And you know, I think everything Graham Mertz is what we've seen is everything Lagway should aspire to be as far as mindset and approach goes for a quarterback. So you hate to see it end like this, Will. Maybe he somehow wants to come back for a medical red shirt somehow. Hard to see that happens at Florida, of course, with the possibility of a new staff and Lagway being the guy next year, hopefully either way. But he came to Florida as a turnover machine from Wisconsin, improved his game while he was a Gator. Was definitely better than what he got credit for coming in. Aren't many special moments to choose from, but he's definitely better than what many expected. I wish it could have worked out better for him, of course. And I know many of us were ready to turn the page to DJ a few weeks ago, but there was still some value for Mertz with this team. Handled all the talk and playing with DJ with the utmost character the last few weeks. I really hope he stays around the game, like he says. I think he's got a great future, you know, maybe not as a player, but Graham Mertz needs to be around people in this game. He'll make them better.
Yeah, I mean, Mertz is a class act. I mean, I don't think, you know, you and me especially have been people who've said it's time to move on to DJ Lagway, but that's never been meant as a like shot at Mertz. It's been we've seen what you can do. We appreciate the improvement that you've shown, the leadership that you've brought, and all those sorts of qualities that you mentioned. And sometimes there's just somebody behind you who has the potential to be a game changer, and you got to see what you've got. I mean, I would have said the same thing about Emory Jones, a few years ago when it was him and Anthony Richardson. Emory Jones waited his turn. Emory Jones was like the first big Dan Mullen recruit. I wanted Emory Jones to succeed, but when I saw Anthony Richardson play, I just said, hey, like, this guy needs to get more playing time. And that's sort of been the point when it's come to DJ Lagway. Mertz outperformed most expectations at Florida in terms of his play on the field. Certainly, I think there were some limitations. He did close up one of those limitations this year. He's taken a lot less sacks this year than he did in the past. It's really ironic that the injury would be non-contact on a touchdown pass, right?
Tell me about
Where
it.
Florida's sitting there at 10-0. And, it is interesting. There would have been one more Mertz drive before the Lagway drive. Lagway throws that interception after Tennessee goes down and scores a touchdown, and it's immediately 10-10. Just looking at that flag route, that is a Lagway pass where he's going to go for it versus Mertz, who would have just checked it down to the guy in the flat. And that drive, they would have lived to see another play in that particular circumstance. And so as much as we've criticized him for not going downfield, there's a lot of virtue to being able to know your limitations and do those sorts of things. And like you said, I think he's going to be an awesome coach. I think, there's a possibility that he's an undrafted free agent and goes and plays somewhere as backup quarterback in the NFL. Maybe
a great analyst too. Like I love him on the microphone. I know when he's on SEC Network, Feinbaum show or whatever. I mean, he's very engaging. I really like that.
So Gators Breakdown has a spot for him, is what you're telling people. I'm getting kicked out. Like, that's it.
I did bring him over after he got hurt last year, so maybe so.
I mean, look, I
can't afford Graham Mertz. My NIL is not that good. So
I think Mertz would tell you that there are times where he would have liked to have pushed the ball down the field. He would have liked to have played better. Think about the first half against Miami this year, the first half against A&M, the first half against Kentucky last year. Those are all sort of games where you look at the stat sheet at the end and go, hey, that didn't look too bad. But then you actually look at what happened in the game and you're like, okay, not exactly. But there were also times, the game against South Carolina last year jumps to mind in terms of his ability to bring Florida back, hit some of those deep plays, hits the big play to Pearsall over the middle.
Missouri, when he gets hurt last year, he's acting like he's Tim Tebow out there and giving it his all and running over people. And, you can't, not saying you are, but just in general, just one more time, can't overlook, just what the moxie and his performance on the field as far as just going out there and giving his all. You didn't have to worry about Graham Mertz in that form or fashion.
Well, and that's the sad part, right? When it comes to sort of the criticism that's comes away from me specifically, is the argument that I have made is if your defense is going to be this bad, then you have to have the guy out there who has the potential to be explosive. And that was never Graham Mertz's game. And so to me, it was a mismatch between who you had at quarterback and what you had on the other side of the ball. And the irony is that the defense is now starting to take strides to a point where having that guy who's steady and who can put up 24 or 26 or 27 points a game on a regular basis might be able to be enough to get you the wins. But now, obviously, Mertz goes out with the injury. Look, you never want to see anyone lose a job to an injury. I don't want to see anybody get injured. If Mertz got beat out fair and square by DJ Lagway, okay, then that's fine. But this isn't Lagway beating him out. This is an injury that puts him on the side. And so not surprising to hear that he's going to be in meeting rooms. I mean, that's honestly the kind of guy he is based on all the stories and the press conferences and everybody who's ever met him. And so I think if DJ Lagway succeeds moving forward, a lot of that is going to be due to the class of Graham Mertz, both before Mertz was hurt and welcoming him into the program and being his roommate when they're on the road and allowing Lagway to take every third drive and, not bristling at that. And, there are a lot of guys who don't like playing time right now who decided not to play in the 5th game of the year because they were going to redshirt and go play someplace else. And Graham Mertz just played in his 5th game against Tennessee. And when you talk about medical red shirts, like that's one of the things that'll be a complicating factor is that he got past that 4-game space and he did it because he loves Florida, because he loves his teammates, and because that's who Mertz is. And so, you can say some things in terms of limitations of what he can be as a quarterback, but I'm not sure you can say a whole lot in terms of limitations of who he is as a person, because to a man, everybody on that team loves him. And, you could see the team deflate when he got injured. And, obviously Lagway comes in, throws the interception right afterwards, which didn't help things either. But I suspect we're going to see a better DJ Lagway next week for two reasons. One, because he's going to have all these snaps in practice, but two, I think it's going to be because the whole team is going to rally around him, because that's what Graham Mertz would demand of them.
Good points, really good points there. Well, let's extend that. Billy Napier was also asked today, do you have to be cognizant of what the game plan will be with DJ Lagway and how much you could run him? Napier responded, yeah, we've been in similar situations in the past with Anthony Richardson, of course. Yeah, that will be a factor. Some of that we'll have to take into consideration, and a little bit more for DJ in terms of how to approach some of those situations. Aiden just got here in January and was injured in the spring, but he has impressed us with his development quite a bit, showed promise since coming off his knee injury and being available for all summer and training camp, in the quote. So certainly will, and I think, let me see, give him credit there. I think Harrison posted earlier, if I can find it there, but how much will this offense change? Well, I can't find it now, but he did. The comment was, do we see more RPO in the Gator offense? Do you give Lagway more of those types of plays? Are you going to put that in the game plan this week so that he excels even more in those situations? How much of the game plan, how much of the play calling changes because of who you have at quarterback now? And you can build a game plan around him. Now, Will, the big dangerous thing with all this is Kentucky has eaten Billy Napier's lunch the last couple of years with their defense and his offense. And even Anthony Richardson, coming off the wonderful Utah game a couple of years ago, one of his worst performances was against Kentucky the very next week. Now, there were some external situations, personal situations Anthony Richardson was dealing with, but I'm not sure it really changes all that much when you go back and look at it. So a very good defense coming to the Swamp again. Lagway did some things against Miami. Texas A&M comes to the Swamp, physical defensive line up front, able to have an effect on the way DJ Lagway played, and snaps that are getting split up. Well, this time it's all his, and maybe that's another angle to this too, is not having to. Maybe he can get into a better groove now. Can DJ Lagway with a week of preparation, but a very tough defense coming in for his not first start, but back in the starting role.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kentucky's a pretty good team. ESPN's FPI has them at 32. I think we all sort of dismissed them maybe after the 31.
Well, look who's on the look who's number 27 on the FPI.
Are you trying to tell me Florida doesn't deserve to be at 27? I think you're probably right, but I think that has to do with the competition that they played, right?
Yes, true.
So I think we all dismissed Kentucky when it was 31-6. South Carolina beat them.
Yeah.
But it turns out South Carolina has 3 losses, and those are to the number 16 LSU, 36-33, to Ole Miss 27-3, and then to Alabama 27-25. Again, I think there's a lot of parity in the SEC this year. It's been nice to see Alabama kind of come back to the pack. They're no longer like the Saban extraordinaires where just you roll the ball out of the field against anybody not named Georgia, Ohio State, or, well, hell, they beat Georgia all the time anyway. So Ohio State or Clemson or something like that, and they just dispatch of them with extreme malice. That's not the way it is anymore. Alabama is going to struggle like everybody else from time to time. And that's going to be kind of fun to see. But, look, Kentucky lost to Georgia 13-12. They lost to Ole Miss, or they beat Ole Miss 20-17. They lost to Vanderbilt 20-13. And certainly with Vanderbilt being Alabama, there's a lot of this guy beat this guy and this guy beat this guy. And so who's actually better in the entire framework here? So Kentucky's a decent team. I don't think Kentucky's a great team. Kentucky's a decent team. Vandergrift's pretty bad at quarterback, and so I think there's not.
It's almost the same story for him as it's been the last couple of years.
Well, of course it is. So that hasn't turned out real well. I'll tell people here's what I think that we should expect from DJ Lagway, and I think people, when I've been pining for Lagway, have taken it to mean that I think he's going to come out and be elite right away. I don't really think that. What I think is he's going to be explosive, and he's probably going to be bad at times. And you're going to see these big peaks and big valleys. And you never saw that with Mertz. It was always just sort of across the board, except for the Miami game this year. It was just sort of even Steven across the board. I don't think you're going to see that with DJ Lagway. I think you're going to see something much more similar to Anthony Richardson in 2022. So if you look at Richardson's PFF ratings, he was 83 against Utah, then 42.5 against Kentucky. 42.2 against USF, 78.6 against Tennessee, 94 against Eastern Washington, 59 against Missouri, 76 against LSU, 60 against Georgia, 86 against A&M, 72 against South Carolina, 84 against Vanderbilt, and 68 against Florida State. I think
and that FSU game was a great start too. So
it was. He was terrible in the second half.
Yeah.
So I that's what we should expect, right? We should expect sine waves. And so it's entirely possible that he'll come out and throw up a complete stinker against Kentucky and then come out and look lights out against Georgia, or vice versa. And I don't want people to kill him if he comes out and throws a stinker out there, because that's going to happen for a true freshman from time to time. In fact, if you look at the PFF ratings for Nico, he had a great opening game against their FCS opponent, and then he's just been sitting at like 60 ever since. So he's been consistently pretty bad. And again, a redshirt freshman who's a 5-star candidate who's coming in has some limitations in his game, and those are getting exposed by teams that are able to see him on film and make adjustments. And we've seen that the last 3 weeks. I think you'll see the same thing with Lagway. I think Lagway is going to have times where you look at it and go, how could he have thrown that ball? And then you're going to see times where you're going to have times where you go, he's the only one who could throw that ball. and the hope is that second part offsets the first part. So
right.
a really interesting stat for me is that Florida's offense in 2022 ranked 29th in the country with Anthony Richardson, averaged 6 yards per play, even though they were really inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
In 2023, they were 51st in yards per play with Graham Mertz, a quarterback. In 2024, 51st in yards per play. So they've been 51st now 2 years in a row. The more explosive guy put up more yardage, more points than the guy who was more consistent over those 2 years. And so I think what we're hoping is that Lagway is going to be he's going to bring the explosivity along with the limitations that we see. And the limitations are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter as the year progresses, because as he gets all the first team reps, as he gets all the play, as he learns to throw the ball away instead of take a sack, as he learns to make the adjustments based on what the defense is doing post snap, as he learns at a certain configuration. So there was a great article I read, I think by Jeff Schwartz, about in college how the wide hash marks actually make it really easy for offensive linemen and quarterbacks to identify when a blitz is coming. So as he learns those types of things and is able to identify where the blitz is coming, get the ball out, all those sorts of things, he's going to get way, 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 way better. But if you take away the Samford game, I think he's got 2 touchdowns and 4 picks. And it would not surprise me if we look up at the end of the year and he's sitting at 12-12 or 14-10 or something like that. Like you're going to have to take some good with some bad, but I think the good is good enough that it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile certainly playing him, and you don't really have an option at this point.
Yeah.
But also that I think we're going to see some special stuff out there too. And I'm excited to see that moving forward, even if it's not in the best of circumstances.
Yeah, Jonathan G says, I hope he learns to run smarter. Lag is taking some dings and limited reps. It's worrisome for me. That's kind of going to what Napier was saying there. And at the same time, Will, that goes back to what we were talking about after the Samford game. And we knew a split was probably likely with Graham Mertz coming back. And I think what you and I also were kind of alluding to were we knew the schedule was going to get harder. We knew defenses – the back half of the schedule we're going to be a bit harder for DJ Lagway. The reason we wanted those snaps there is, we knew the bumps were coming, but the more snaps he gets in the UCF and the Mississippi States of the world, he'll be more ready for the Tennessee and the Kentuckys and the November's slate as well. So I think that's something else. I think you and I, kind of went to of not necessarily ready to turn the page for DJ Lagway because we thought he was ready, but he would need to be ready. And that's kind of where we were going with that. Let's see. Senator Thrax, I hope I said that right. Lagway will make freshman mistakes probably at the wrong time, but it's something we have to accept. We have to. That's because, as Will said, there's nobody else to turn to right now. And so, DJ Lagway will be the guy out there. Certainly, the high variance to Anthony Richardson 2022, probably, a great comparison there, Will, of what we could get from DJ Lagway. I mean, he's going to be ready. I mean, look, I know he had his lumps, and I know it was a rough second half for him against Tennessee, but 100,000 screaming at you, it's 3rd and 18, and be able to step up and make that throw to Chimere DK, absolutely, how you want to see a game in for the situation. He had some to do with that interception early on that they put himself in, be able to bounce back and, in the clutch situation, be able to make that throw. So certainly ready to see what they draw up, how he responds to, being at home. It's a night game in the swamp, but man, to me, I mean, it's a really good test with what Kentucky has been able to do to a Billy Napier offense the last couple of years.
And well, look, over the years, we've seen Florida quarterbacks go down and what happens when the backup comes in and how terrible the offense can be. And so it's not a complete surprise that it would bog down a little bit. But the other thing is in those games, like I'm thinking about like Jacoby Brissett coming in with very little prep. You got Tyler Murphy coming in when Jeff Driscoll goes down. You got Driscoll coming in when Jeff Brantley goes down. John Brantley, sorry. Those games in the past have highlighted that the guy's not ready. And in none of those games did I feel like any of those guys was ready to make the throw that Lagway made in that situation in that Tennessee game. Like,
it's not.
I can look at the
foul trash for Felipe Franks is very weird or very and very limited. You don't see that a whole lot.
Well, and you have to have the stones to have played a terrible second half and still step up and make that throw. Like we talk about defensive backs all the time needing to have a one-play memory, and you get beat, but you still got to go out there and you got to pretend like you're the best guy out there and that you're never going to get beat. And in many ways, that's kind of the attitude that you could sense from Lagway in that moment, stepping up, making that throw. If he makes that throw 2 feet further behind, if it's not right on the numbers, then DK doesn't score. He gets tackled, and you're trying to figure out how to clock the ball.
Well, I even text you. Remember his next throw after the interception? It was the RPO, but he still had the confidence to look. I'm not going to hand this off. If it's there, I'm going to pass the ball. I'm not going to automatically just hand it off.
Well, and that is what you've seen when you've looked at the tape with Lagway is he's got a little bit of Favre in him where it's like, I don't care. I'm gunning that thing in there. There was a play where he threw it into triple coverage on a 2nd and 10, made it third and 3.
The Trey Wilson catch.
Yeah. It was 3rd down, 3rd and 10. He got it in there. That's why they went for it on 4th and 3, right? And I'm sitting there looking at that going, no. Okay, all right. Well, that might have been really terrible. We're going to have some of those.
Yeah.
Right? But honestly, we had that with Anthony Richardson. Like I was thinking back to the LSU game a few years ago when Mullen was still in charge and Emory Jones comes out and throws a pick 6 to start the second half. And that was when he finally went over to Anthony Richardson and gave him the whole second half. And Richardson had that Florida offense flying up and down the field and then threw probably one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen when Florida had a chance to tie it at the end, and then LSU took it right down the field because that's what happened against the Florida defense back in 2021. But those are the things, right? Those things happen with guys who are gunslingers, and the question is going to be over time, is Lagway able, like his ceiling he's already shown is pretty significant. The question is, but his floor is also pretty significant right now. And really what the question is about him is not, can he raise the ceiling? It's, can he raise the floor enough to where the gap between elite play and his floor is really very minimal. And if he can do that, you've got a star. If you still have the real big gap between the floor and the ceiling, well, now you're looking at Anthony Richardson level play. But again, Anthony Richardson level play, which was granted very inconsistent. His QB rating was like 130. He ran the ball a lot more than Lagway's probably going to, but that offense ranked 29th in the country. His play opened up a ton of stuff for the running backs. And I think what you're going to see is that Lagway's ability to go down the field is going to open up space for the wide receivers in the same way that Richardson opened up space for the running backs. And if he can open up space for wide receivers, we've seen what DK can do. We've seen what Badger can do. We've seen what Wilson can do. And we've seen a little bit about what Mizell and Tank Hawkins and those guys can do as well. And opening up the space for those guys, I think, is going to be critical to making this offense move. And so I think you're going to see a lot more explosives, and I think you're going to see a lot more busts. And that's going to be the question is, I actually think it's an thing to have a bunch of booms and a bunch of busts this year. The question will be, do the busts teach him enough that next year it's just a bunch of booms? And if so, you can see that if you look at Peyton Manning when he took over for Tennessee back in what was 94, he's probably about as polished a quarterback as we've ever seen come in that first year. He goes 7-1, beats Virginia Tech in a bowl game. By the end of that season, he was slinging the ball all over the place. But if you look right when he came in, I think it was Cole quit, and then Todd Helton went down. So he was the third string quarterback, right? And when he came in, it was a little bit tentative to start with, and then he took off. And that's what I'm kind of looking to see from Lagway is can he, he's been a little bit tentative at times. He's taken the shots with his design plays and those sorts of things. But there have been some times where he's definitely been tentative. The question is now, at what point does he take off? Because I think everybody's ready to see him fly.
Well, part of that is, too, and this is what we'll end on, Montreal Johnson. Billy Napier did bring that up today, too. Quote, this is all he said about it. We don't anticipate it being long-term issue. So there you go for Montreal Johnson, of course, who went down against Tennessee as well. Well, to think about Lagway now is, though, with no Montreal Johnson, your backfield is very, very young. Maybe Trayon Webb comes back at the same, and he's got a second year, but he's still a very young player. Not a lot of experience behind him to go along with Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson. There's going to be your three guys right there at the running back spot. Trayon Webb needs to come back because Florida needs a third running back right now. But Will, kind of going back to the freshman mistakes that's going to happen. I mean, it was on I think it was the same drive. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember. Was it the same drive where the fourth down end around got stuff where Lagway and Ball run into each other?
I think so, yeah.
So there's another thing. Now you're throwing a true freshman quarterback out there a lot more. You may be throwing the freshman running back out there a lot more. Look, don't get me wrong. We all like what Jaden Ball has done, but Montreal Johnson was having the game of his career so far, I think. He had some really good games in year one in 2022 there, but the way he was just punishing and running over Tennessee Vols Saturday night, another reason you hate to see him go down anyway, but he was playing really well. Certainly the best game of his season so far. And no other running back was come close to what Montreal Johnson was doing Saturday night. And there's been a lot of talk about him getting less carries and let's give more to Ball and Webb and Jackson. But now he'll be out for some time. We'll see. Another bye week, of course, coming up after Kentucky game. Maybe he's back for Georgia. We'll see. But it does seem like coming up for Kentucky, no Montreal Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a welcome to the SEC.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Florida now has a true freshman quarterback playing because of injury, and they're going to have a true freshman starting at running back because of injury, and that's what happens in the SEC. This is why recruiting. It's why stacking guys. It's why making sure you have equal distribution is so important. Right. And it could have happened at the wide receiver position, could have happened at the linebacker position, could have happened at the defensive back position. In some ways, did happen at the defensive back position with Ace Turner going down, Devin Moore being injured, and there've been some other. Jakeem Jackson went down at one point, so Douglas went down for a little bit. So they've had to nurse injuries elsewhere as well. These just happen to be the highest profile spots. What I'll say is that Florida's running game, because of the limitations in the offensive line, has not been like the bellwether thing that you would expect to count on in a Billy Napier era. And so I don't know that like the productivity is what you're missing so much as you're missing the leadership. And, you mentioned the two guys running into each other, the consistency to make sure that everybody is doing their job on every play. And so, there are probably going to be some screw ups. And this is one of those things is that Napier won't get any benefit of the doubt when there are screw-ups because there have been so many screw-ups with players, whether they're old or young, and he doesn't deserve a benefit of the doubt because of that very fact. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to be some screw-ups coming.
Right.
And I think from the standpoint of of clock management, like the delay a game that Lagway took when they were deep in their own zone, like, do you want to waste a timeout there? Mm-hmm. Is it important to call the I mean, you probably give up maybe 15, 20 yards of field position there because you've got your punter pinned with his heels on the back and they get a good on the back end line and they get a good return. If it had been at the 5, well, now the punter's a yard away from the end line. Does he take his full steps? Does he get a better punt off? Those sorts of things. Those are the things that are going to happen. And I think we probably have to be okay with it, that those are going to happen. The thing that we can't be okay with are, too many men on the field and the guys who are experienced not stepping up and making those same kinds of mistakes. And
I mean, that's what they got hated too, like that Tennessee game. It was it the final drive where they had to overcome so much, and it's Austin Barber making the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just like, come on, man. The last player, I expect that to happen. And there you go. Like you said, you don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore just because there you go. It was a perfect example of it. It's not just the young players. It's one of the most experienced players you have on the roster.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the benefit is that we've seen true freshmen step in and be ready to go. And so, that's going to have to happen at running back, and, it's going to have to happen at other places too, because we're only 6 games in. There are going to be more injuries as we go along. So if we're expecting Florida to not have to weather more injuries at more places, I think we're mistaken. Now, you hope they don't stack up at one place, right? Now, that's the danger maybe at the running back position, is that is a physical place to play in the SEC. There's a reason why you want 4 or 5 deep in that room. And like you mentioned, Montreal Johnson down, Trayon Webb also down, and now you're a true freshman because you don't necessarily have a senior, a junior, a sophomore, a freshman, and a redshirt freshman or something on your roster. Like, it's not distributed that way. But a guy like Cam Carroll was out there talking to Mertz. Those are sort of the guys that you were hoping were going to contribute, and he just hasn't been on the field because of injury, obviously. But those are the kind of guys who sort of break into or break to mind when you start talking about that. So, yeah, I mean, look, Montreal Johnson's a big loss, not just from what he does on the field, but from a leadership perspective, because Graham Mertz, one of the things you can say about him is he commanded the huddle when he came into there. The question is going to be, does Lagway command the huddle in the same way? Is he able to calm everybody down? Is he able to execute when it's time to execute, and those sorts of things? Now,
I love that too. Before we go on with that, Lagway was on Winging It with Wingo, the Florida Victorious podcast with Derek Wingo, and Derek Wingo was supposed to break the team down versus Sanford, and he was like, no, DJ, you're doing it. So it's those little things. Don't get me wrong. We all want wins and losses, and hopefully, or not losses. We all want wins, but it's those things that that's what DJ's going to have to do now. As you said, and maybe now it's not somebody giving it to him. He's going to have to command, hey, this is my team. Let me break the team down. And granted, early in his career, it's probably needs to happen that way. Wingo going to him saying, no, I'm going to let you do it. But now at this time, it's your team for the rest of 2024, buddy. You do those things.
Yeah. Well, the other part of that is that I think, we talked a lot about Mertz being a class act, but everything from the Lagway side has also been a class act. And I think the players appreciate the deference that he's given to his elder, right? I mean, I think those guys, those experienced guys, none of them are looking at the true freshman going, oh, that guy, like he thinks he's better than everybody else. Like, I'm not going to block for him. I'm not going to play hard for him. Screw him. Mertz was my guy. I think at the end of the day, the way these guys have meshed, the way they've behaved, the way they've handled this situation makes this transition easier. And, we focus on that because of the quarterback position and how critical it is. But to bring this back to Montreal Johnson's had to share carries with guys who he's constantly had to hear are better than him for the better part of 3 years now. And Johnson is the guy who keeps showing up. Johnson is the guy who they keep giving the ball to in critical situations. And quite honestly, Johnson is the guy who has delivered and was delivering against Tennessee until he had the injury. And so, those true freshmen have big shoes to fill, but he's been sharing time too and been willing to do that and sort of understood that that's his role and all that sort of stuff. So I think the same thing applies to him that applies to the Mertz Lagway situation, which is, this is an opportunity for Montreal Johnson to show that leadership from the sidelines the same way we want to see that leadership shown by Graham Mertz. And then it's just a question of how quick can Montreal Johnson get back, because obviously he should have an opportunity to do that. And it'd be nice to have him back out on the field.
Last one, because Armand Jones brings it up, or Armani, it's an exclamation mark. But we've talked about this in Gators Breakdown Plus a good bit. The real question is, when is Eugene Wilson, Trey, going to catch a ball down the field? I think it's a very fair question. With Graham Mertz, it was kind of the pop pass, very short to the line of scrimmage. I still don't think he should have been the option on the slant route for a conversion. That should have been Elijah Badger, in my opinion there. But, with DJ Lagway now being the quarterback, if Trey Wilson's not a downfield threat more with Lagway at quarterback, I don't know. Is it by design they still want to keep him that close to the line of scrimmage, or is it just, not in his arsenal. I mean, if it's not going to happen with Lagway, it's probably not ever. No matter the reason, it probably won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been clamoring for them to put him in the backfield, and maybe the injury to Montrell Johnson pushes them towards doing that, because they did it in the South Carolina game and they did it in the Georgia game last year. They got him in situations where he was on linebackers. And they didn't necessarily even have to get him the ball down the field that often. The fact that they got him on linebackers opened up a bunch of stuff. So there was one where they had him lined up as a running back, and then they slipped him out on one of those flood routes. But now you've got a really fast, twitchy guy with a linebacker trying to run after him from the sideline, and he's not going to be able to get to him. And all of a sudden it turns into a 12, 14-yard gain. The end around, people know that's coming. They know they have gotten better at defending that, and it's not necessarily going to get you more than 5, 6, 7 yards at a pop. But the other thing you can do when you have a running back or a wide receiver in the backfield, if you get him on the linebacker, is you can send him deep on the linebacker. Ohio State does a really nice job of this. Ohio State oftentimes brings a wide receiver into the backfield under Ryan Day, gets him on the linebacker, and then sends him down the middle of the field. They actually had a play a few years ago in the playoff game against Georgia where they ran essentially 4 outs from all of their wide receivers. They had 4 wide, and then they had a running back, or they had a wide receiver as the running back. So they had 5 wide, and then they motioned, or no. So they came out 4 wide, but then they had the running back, or the wide receiver as the running back, and it meant that he was on a linebacker. The defense didn't have the opportunity to switch, and so what they wound up with, they just sent him right down the middle of the field and had 4 out routes essentially for all the wide receivers, and it just opened up like the Red Sea. There was nobody there up front, and they caught him in a middle of the field open setting and just sent him right down in the middle, and there was the throw, and it was a touchdown against Georgia that really sort of changed the framework of that game. And that's what I hope they do. But I'm, I have not seen it yet. And I've been clamoring for it now for 2 years, ever since I saw that play. I mean, one of the things that's a little bit disheartening about the Napier offense, or at least the Napier play calling, is you see neat stuff every week. And you're like, that'd be really cool. That incorporates well with something Florida does, or that incorporates really well with Florida's personnel. And it would be awesome if we would see some of those wrinkles from time to time. But we don't necessarily see that. I mean, geez, you see the Lions the other day running a hook and ladder with their left tackle against the Cowboys. And man, how much do you have to hate the Cowboys to run a hook and lateral to your left tackle when you're up 37 to 13 or whatever?
Did you see the Penn State play where they had their tight end line up at center?
Oh yeah, I mean,
he snaps the ball and wide open down the middle of the field.
Again, just creativity, right? So, and it doesn't need to be this like trick play type stuff. Right. It's just, hey, you've got a guy who is a threat if you get him in open space, and the little end around is fine, but it doesn't give him the opportunity to get a guy in his crosshairs who's not trying to catch him from an angle. Right. What Trey Wilson doesn't do is he typically does not beat the safety coming over an angle. He gets taken down at about the 9-10 yard mark when they run that jet sweep. Instead, what they need to do, in my estimation, is get him out in space where the linebacker or the safety or the corner is squared up on him. And now he's got the opportunity to try to make him miss, try to juke him and try to get past him. And they just haven't given him that opportunity. I think, look, Badger's been great. Badger's been a revelation. But one of the things that I said when they brought Badger in was that this was going to allow them to slide Wilson back into the slot, into his role from last year. And I think in many ways, that's kind of what we've seen. And
let's remember, it was his first game back.
Sure. I mean, I'm not upset about his usage in this game specifically. I think the frustration is that there have been multiple games where he could have been a deep threat, and he just has not been. And so that becomes the question, right? Is how do you utilize him in a way that's if you only have a certain number of plays, or if you only have, you want to protect him in certain ways, how do you get the most out of him in those plays? And I think you can make an argument that Napier has not done that thus far in 2024.
All right, there we go. Florida, Kentucky up this week. Well, if Florida loses to Kentucky this time, they will have had a senior class that has never lost to Florida.
Oi.
Of course, Dan Mullen kind of started it 2018. Kentucky's been putting it to Florida for the most part since then. 3 straight now with Mullen's last year, Billy Napier's first 2 years. That's hard to fathom that that's a possibility now, that Kentucky could have a senior class that has not lost to Florida. So,
well, I mean, look.
Look, with the transfer portal, there's not many of them on the roster probably, but still.
Tennessee is a better team than Kentucky. You just went on the road and took Tennessee all the way to the finale while constantly shooting yourself in the foot while doing it. And so you should be able to go out and beat Kentucky. All that at home.
Tennessee was better than Kentucky last year as well.
Well, again, all that being said, you got to go out and you got to prove it on the field. And one thing you can say about Mark Stoops' teams is that they're going to come out and they're going to be physical. And
for whatever reason, he puts it together against Florida. Like, Florida's not Kentucky's biggest rival, but for whatever reason, that man has it out for Florida. Like,
well, I mean, probably because he heard about the losing streak for so many years and finally said, I'm ending that thing. And honestly bought himself a lot of credibility by ending it, right? I mean, you get to that point, and I mean, it's funny. Like, you see, this is one of the things I've been thinking about a lot this year is it worth it? Like, I taken my 9-year-old Max down for the LSU game. I texted you after the game the other night going, am I being cruel to Max, like indoctrinating him into this? Like, is this a bad thing?
I replied child abuse.
But the reason I'm thinking about it is that the climb is what makes it worth it, right? And when you're a little kid and you're watching the team, you're a front runner and you pick the team that's going to win, and everything's great because your team's winning, whatever. But as you get older, you're going to go, when you've picked a team and you're not one of those weird people who just like, oh, well, I like the Patriots and now I like the Bills and now I like the Jets. Never the Jets because they're never good. but when you're constantly switching around, when you're the Cowboys, Lakers,
Duke,
Cowboys, Lakers, Duke, and Yankees fan.
Yeah.
Those folks just sort of switch based on who's good and that sort of stuff. But when you're somebody who's like diehard Gator, ride till you die, that sort of stuff, the down part of it is going to make the upside awesome. And so the build is what matters. So we've been building for a decade. I'm kind of tired of the build.
Yeah.
But
I know what it feels like to be my dad now. Grew up watching Florida stink. Spurrier gets there, and you finally you can take a big breath. You can celebrate like you've never celebrated before. Now, granted, I grew up in what you're saying. Florida was good, but now I'm at that adult stage where this team stinks, and man, I'm ready to see some winning football, and I'm going to be so happy when I do.
Well, I will tell you that I did not appreciate 2006 and 2008 nearly enough.
Yeah.
Like, you got the Spurrier era, then you have a little bit of time in the desert with Zook, and then Meyer comes in and wins immediately. And it's like, oh, this is just the way it is at Florida. Zook was the outlier, right? Yeah. That was sort of like the thought process was Zook is the outlier. No, it turns out that Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer are two of the best coaches in the last 50 years. And so those guys are the outlier, like finding those guys, having those guys at the right time, with the right system, with college football set up in the precise way that allows them to take advantage of different things. And look, I think if Spurrier was 30 years younger and he was out there coaching now, I think he'd be good. But he also enjoyed golf, and I'm not sure that the NIL era would have been his cup of tea. So, you need the right timing, you need the right coach, and you need sort of all the stars to align in order to get that stuff to happen. And I think most Florida fans looked at that Zook era and said, it's like, that's not what we're supposed to be. And that is true. But I think the two around it were probably the outliers, where Florida had transcendent coaches who were able to bring titles to the organization. And so we'll get there again. We will get that coach again, and that coach is going to drive Florida to a place where all of a sudden we're loving things again. I mean, you even see it. There were message board stuff for Kiffin this week talking about it's run its course. I'm like, you people think it's run its course with Lane Kiffin winning 11 games at Ole Miss? Like, man, like that guy has spoiled that fan base at this point. Because that is a tough job to win 11 games year after year after year. And he's not going to be able to do it. He's going to have some years where he's 9-4. He's going to have some years where he's 10-3. And hopefully he doesn't have any more years where he's 9-4, 10-3 at Ole Miss. But you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah. The climb is the thing that I think we all need to hold on to now, because when it happens, it will be sweet.
Yeah.
And just sort of, I'm holding on to that, and maybe I'm doing it because I feel bad for making Max a Gator fan right now, and I'm just trying to justify it. But I believe it. He and I are going to be pouring champagne on each other at some point. But hopefully, when we are, he's not old enough to actually drink the champagne. That's really the only thing I ask for.
My really, really, really close friend Josh texted me not long ago. It was a few weeks ago, and I think he's listening. He's a Georgia fan, big Georgia fan. And he texted me about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I guess he was listening to Gators Breakdown, and his son asked, "Dad, has Florida always sucked?" And he's like, "No,
only since Gators Breakdown started."
Yeah. Only since Gators Breakdown started. He goes, "No, they were what Georgia is right now at one point." And he had to explain it to him. So, it's
and we will be again.
Yeah, it's those type of things, and and Will, you pointed out what Spurrier and Meyer and not much else outside of that, especially with Zook. That doesn't mean you have to live in that world. You don't have to accept because what Florida was before Spurrier and after Meyer. It doesn't have to be that way. Take any program's best 2 coaches away, and there's been a lot of talk in that regard of, oh, what's the Florida job now? There's nothing without Spurrier and Meyer. No program is anything with their 2 best, and how long college football has been going on. That timeline matches up with a lot of programs. Take any program's 2 best coaches away, and then tell me what the results are. So, to me, it's asinine to compare Florida to Ole Miss in the first place, but then let that be your fallback. Oh, they were nothing without these 2 coaches. Okay, well, you can do that for almost every program out there.
Preach. I got nothing, man.
Yeah.
You said it best. I am not one to settle for 4-8. I'm really not one to settle for 8-4. And quite honestly, I'm kind of in the Georgia camp where I'm not settling for Mark Richt either. And 10-2. It's like, this is a championship level program. Championship level programs win championships. Florida needs to get to that point. And as of right now, this isn't a championship level program, and that's a problem. And so that means that I think you and I both believe that changes need to be made. And I certainly believe that. And until it is, we'll analyze it the way it goes. But, we have ample evidence at this point. And the Tennessee game was sort of the nadir of all that evidence. It was the most Napier-y of losses that we've had under Billy Napier. And
it continues kind of from last year. I mean, starting with the Arkansas game. I mean, that is
start with the Utah game.
But I'm just saying, just kind of the way it felt. Well, you're right with the Utah game, I guess, with the penalties and the.
Well, it's even worse, right? Because we both got ourselves excited this offseason, and then they lay the egg against Miami, and I told you, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I will never trust again. It's like Billy Napier is the spouse who's cheated on you 3 times. And you're like, I don't believe you, but I'll never do it again. That's what you said the first 2 times. I don't believe you. Show me. And had the opportunity to show us
exactly
against Tennessee and didn't get the job done. And story of this era so far, man. Had an opportunity. Didn't get the job done. And it turns out at some point you got to get the job done.
Yep. All right. Well, another chance this Saturday. Kentucky comes to the Swamp Saturday night. SEC Network, I believe. So, all right, that'll do it. We'll, preview coming out later this week.
Yep, absolutely. Preview coming out. We'll have a stand-up and holler. Nick has his power back, so we're able to do stand-up and holler this week.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody's okay from the hurricane. That's certainly I mean, I don't want to say it was just a Category 3, but it could have been a whole lot worse. My mother-in-law somehow, even though the thing hit her almost directly, didn't lose power throughout the entire thing. So it just goes to show you that even hurricanes are afraid of my mother-in-law. And she's got a power around her, man. It's like a force field. Like the hurricane's like, oh shit, we're gonna turn south.
That was good. That was a really good laugh. Oh man!
Hopefully she listens to this.
Oh man! On that note, my good friend John Sachs, of course, Sachs Law Group, free policy reviews, free case consultations, expert guidance on property damage claims. Contact Sachs Law Group. Of course, they're in Tampa, but he does the whole state. hurricanemiltonhelp.com for more information. So there we go. John Sachs can help you out there. And yeah, for me this week, of course, Adam Luckett from Kentucky Sports Radio will be my guest to break down Kentucky a bit. So look for that episode later on this week. So, all right. Good stuff, Will.
Yeah, man. Go Gators. Let's get a win this week.
Absolutely.
I need a win.
Yes. Go Gators. Will Miles at Will Miles SEC and Read and Reaction. I am David Waters, host of Gators Breakdown. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.